Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to another episode of the Infertile Diagnosis. I'm your host, Monica Cox, along with Sarah Clark, and we're here to support, inspire, and educate those who are all consumed with the label of infertility. We totally know how you're feeling. Both Sarah and I were diagnosed with a form of infertility before we hit our 30s. We let the fertility experts dictate our past and ignored what our bodies were trying to tell us for far too long. So here we are, helping you take control of your infertile diagnosis. So we have covered kind of the basics of who we are, where we came from, and the beginning of our trying to conceive journeys. So the infertile diagnosis is all about inspiring you to become your own hero and not get hung up on your diagnosis like we did for so many years. So we wanted to explore, if you didn't have a diagnosis, would you accepted your fate?
So if I didn't know it was premature ovarian failure, and so yeah, what do you mean by that? Like, would I have?
So if you didn't know you had that, that someone told you you can't use your own eggs, what would you have done differently, do you think? Because obviously you just went straight to donor egg, did IVF, and that was the end of your story. And I know this is probably really hard to answer in hindsight because your life is played out and it's a beautiful life. But I always wonder, and I think a lot of people, like we did, we get so hung up on the diagnosis and we feel like we have no control over it.
Okay, so the diagnosis is not there, but I still can't. I don't know so the diagnosis is not there, but it's not working.
Yeah. So
Would I have?
Yeah. Where would you have gone? Like, what would you have done at that time, do you think? Because you're a planner. So
Well, I've
where?
done a whole lot of shit. Yeah, like I would have gone. So if it wasn't working, I probably would have. If I didn't have the diagnosis, the POF, and I was like, oh, okay. So I would obviously still think I could have my children naturally. I'm 28. Like, why wouldn't have gone to accept a donor egg? So I would have dug deeper into making my own eggs work.
Yep.
And like looking at I do think I would have looked at my own health, because I came from this really healthy family. Would I have eventually have? Yeah, I don't know how long it would have taken me to find the fact that, the food and the mindset and, functional medicine, it wasn't even called that back then. Would I have, where would I have gone? I might have gone right to, adoption? I don't know. I would have gone somewhere. I would have had a child. So it was going to happen. So I would have, yeah.
So my point is that we get hung up on what people tell us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that
Yeah.
our diagnosis, for some reason, we get into our brain that it's set in stone.
Yeah, totally.
And I think a lot of people get misled down this path of infertility. I feel very fortunate that I had an unexplained infertility because I didn't get hung up. I just went wherever I could. The world was my oyster of infertility. And that's the only reason I got to the point of diet lifestyle, because I wasn't hung up on, okay, I have PCOS, so therefore it's going to be really hard for me to have kids. You get that into your head, right? I have endometriosis, it's not curable, so I can't do anything about it. So I'm just going to go down this route. Or like yourself, not having it, and for you didn't have anyone around you going, well, why didn't you try this? Or why didn't you try that? It was literally, here's your diagnosis. This is where you're going to go. And we do it.
Off I marched.
Right. And I just wonder if there's, and I'm sure there is, if not hundreds of thousands of women like we were, like you were, and then like I was for a while, just following that beat of like, okay, this is my fate. And so I'm just gonna go and take it. And this is my life and I can't do anything about it.
Yeah, blindly follow that and not being able to look at it with in a new light.
Yeah.
And just like I was so laser focused on over here that I didn't see I didn't connect any of these dots. I didn't see there was any other possibilities. Um, luckily for me, it worked, but it may not have. Like there's people I speak with on a regular basis that it hasn't. They have gone down donor eggs and that hasn't worked. They have tried with, POF to have naturally, it hasn't worked. And then there's other things going on in their body. So yeah, I think that the hindsight piece to know what I would have done back then, it's really, it's an interesting question, right? Because it's trying to be able to see, I don't know if I would have, because I still thought some of this stuff was woo woo and kind
Yeah.
of nutty because my mom went and did it and I was still making fun of her for being vegan. So I was kind of like, oh no, I would eat my Chef Boyardee. So like, not that I was eating that a lot, but Joey Louis and that kind of stuff. And I don't think like it's when you're it's to be very open. I consider myself very open-minded. So, I think to be able to look at this and look at functional medicine, you need to be open-minded. If you don't think it's going to work, it won't work because you won't do the work.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. And that's, I mean, my key point there is just, and this is what the whole podcast is, it's just do not get hung up on what someone says you cannot do or that you have, and think that you can't be your own hero, that you can't do things to improve your situation. And, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying if you do X, Y, and Z, you're going to get pregnant, because that's just, we know that life doesn't work that way. But really taking your life, your diagnosis, and making it your own, and making it your own journey, and not looking back like we do and go, okay, I probably didn't have to do A, B, and C. I could have taken other avenues and that could have led to other things. So yeah, and it's just, I think we've done a really good job of coming to terms with our life and what we thought it was going to be, right? Because I think that's what infertility does to everyone. You think you're going to get married, have kids, and you're going to have a normal life. And then the infertility, no matter which way your journey ends, it rocks you. It makes you a different person, because you do start looking at life a little bit different, and you have come to terms because you have to let go of those childhood dreams.
Yeah, where you think I wanted to have my children at 28. Luckily I was able to have, my daughter at 31, but I had this, this plan. And, the whole planning thing is silly because it's like I'm naturally a planner, but now I can plan and let go of the outcome.
Yeah.
But then it's sort of, I had to control things and have it go my way. And, yeah, it is kind of being able to surrender and accept, and when you're on this journey and kind of trying to figure out what's going to happen with like you have a plan for your life. And was the plan for my life when I was 12 that I was going to have my kids with donor eggs? Hell no. Like why? It's still actually kind of like shocking that that's what I did. And now I was very open about it. I've written a book about it, like very open about it, because people would say to me, well, are you going to tell your kids? And I'm like my mom was adopted. She didn't. Why didn't you tell me?
Yeah. Oh,
Like
Sarah.
I should have known. Not that
Yeah.
this is not that this is adoption. Or we kind of clicked
Oh,
out.
yeah. The kids are home and they're streaming the TV, and it's totally messing with my internet. Hi, welcome back. So sorry for the cutoff. And that was the end of our session. So we are just picking up a week later. And Sarah was talking about being really open and honest with your situation, and how you did donor egg, and why it was important to be really honest with your kids and the people around you.
Yeah, so my mom was adopted, and she didn't tell us that she was adopted till I was 12. I remember thinking, I was shocked. Like it was shocking to me that she hadn't told me, and I wasn't even the one that was adopted, because I didn't understand the big secrecy, because this was back in the 40s where no one even told anyone that they were adopted. My mom was told that she was adopted, but for some reason she kept it from us. So not that having kids with donor eggs is the same as being adopted, because it's not, but I just wanted to be very open and honest about with my kids, because I felt it was their history and really had nothing to do with me. And it would be selfish for me not to tell them. So I've always told them. It's been part of the narrative from the beginning, as early as I could, maybe like probably like 4 or 5, when you kind of got into those books of, where do I come from? And I'm like, mommy had to borrow eggs for another lady because her eggs weren't working. And so as we've gone along, they've always known. And one of my kids wanted to see the history, the genetic history. The other was not interested. So I have it on a piece of paper because it came in the mailbox, right? So I have it on a piece of paper, the maternal and the paternal histories of the grandparents, back to the grandparents. But it's just been part of the conversation. I've written a book about it and been very open about it. So it's, although my son has been running around school not running around, but telling people at school that he's adopted, because he goes, it's just too confusing to talk about the donor egg thing. I'm just telling people I'm adopted and I'm from Ohio. Meanwhile, he's from Toronto, but yeah. So it's too confusing to go into all that stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, I would imagine that most kids on the playground, that's not what you're talking about, or
No.
even, IVF or anything like that. I mean, it's more talked about nowadays, I suppose. But I remember one of my friends, she got pregnant at 47, actually. And I didn't even think about asking her any kind of, prodding questions about how she got pregnant, because she was the same age as my mom. So it was a very weird thing to me because, I was, I think, 25, not even thinking about kids. And many years later, she told me that she was an IVF baby. And I was like, oh, okay. Still didn't know what IVF was. And then many years later, when she was ready to tell her daughter and to tell other people that she was a donor egg. So yeah, it's most people just don't know, right? I think many people listening to this know, because you have to know. These are the things you start investigating and looking into. Um, I know that part of my journey, I started looking into surrogacy because I just didn't think I could carry my child. You spend almost 5 years not thinking, well, not ever getting pregnant. So I'm not even thinking it. It's not happening. So you start investigating these things, and it does open a whole like Pandora's box up to a whole different world, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the surrogacy. Did connect with a lady who was a surrogate, and she had helped. She had 2 sets of twins as a surrogate, and then a single child. So like 3 pregnancies, but 5 babies. Plus, I think she had 5 of her own kids, and she was in her 30s, like, so super young, but she just felt called to become a surrogate. And her story was like so inspiring. And she'd help. There was a same-sex couple, men, and they had twins, but I think they were each from each other's. So I guess they must have been fraternal. So each other's sperm. I don't know how that would have worked. But and then I think the other was a heterosexual couple. Another one was a heterosexual couple. But I've also interviewed someone for my podcast who she was a surrogate, and since she had 2 daughters, and I think she said 3 children through surrogacy. So it's just like, that is like so amazing. Someone to do that, to give
Yeah.
the gift of life to someone else, is insane. Um,
Yeah.
Obviously, in our society now, we've got Kim Kardashian doing her, the surrogate for her 2 little kids there. I don't know. I just think it's, if that's where you need to go, then that's an option, which we're lucky.
Yeah, exactly.
It's expensive though. It's an expensive option.
Yeah, and it's different in every country. I It's funny, like looking back, when we were going to do IVF, and I know you know a lot about this, there was a chance to like cut your bills in half to share your eggs. And I always thought, yeah, I would do that. I would totally help someone out and give them my eggs. Unfortunately for us, I didn't have many eggs to give, so that was never an option. And there was a part of me that would have loved to be a surrogate. But yeah, I mean, obviously, with all of our issues, how long our journey was, that was never an option. It's not an option now. But it is an amazing thing to, one, donate your eggs, and to become a surrogate, because I don't think people, I think like adoption, people don't realize like what a big impact that is on yourself and then on the person that is receiving those. You know, if you're the eggs, or you know, the surrogacy, or you know, an adoptive child, it's a very emotional thing for everyone involved. And you know, a lot of people talk about these that like a little bit willy-nilly, like, you know, we get just adopt all the time, don't we? Where it's so much more than that. And you know, those people who aren't living in that life just are just completely naive, and fair enough to them, they are. Why would you think about that stuff if you didn't have to, right?
Yeah, I definitely thought of adoption. Like when I was told it was donor eggs, I remember looking at websites for international adoption, and adoptions in Canada, adoptions in the US. And yeah, obviously we didn't actually end up going down that route and getting, because that's a whole other procedure, years of getting qualified to do that. But yeah, I looked at those options, and with the donor egg thing, yeah, and all of these things, it doesn't necessarily in the very beginning, the whole magnitude of it, but it is impacting, your life and then your children. Look at my son, like trying to explain,
Mm-hmm.
I'm up for a donor egg, because everyone's like, how come your mom's 6 foot and my son is like barely 5'2" and he's 14? But he will eventually grow because his donor is 5'7", but he's getting all these questions, and he's like, just because I'm adopted. So yeah, it is interesting. It affects a lot of things, but I think just being open about it, and if you can kind of have a sense of humor about it.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, around the donor egg thing, I expected to get, when they're teenagers, you're not my mom and blah, blah, blah. Who are you? And I didn't take that personally. So when I
Yeah.
got it, it's like, oh, okay, good. I must be doing a good job as a mom because they're giving me grief. So
Right.
other people, that may cut them to the quick, and really impact them. It didn't for me, but because I've just been very open about it with our kids. But
Mm-hmm.
I think everyone's different though, what's going to feel right for them, if they want to tell their children, who they want to tell. You got to do what feels right for you.
Right. And to be honest, I think all kids at some point, I'm positive I was figuring out how I was adopted. Like, you just get pissed off at your parents no
Yeah,
matter you know what they are. Your kid is always going to tell you at some point they hate you.
yeah, of course. And I'm like, I must be doing a good job. They say they hate me.
Exactly. And that's just redefining motherhood, isn't it? You know, motherhood nowadays is not what it was in the 50s. Thank God for for some of us who don't want to wear an apron and be in the kitchen. And you know, motherhood is a completely different kettle of fish
Mhm.
nowadays. And I think that's important to start redefining that for yourself. So if you are going, you know, if you thought motherhood was a certain way your whole entire life, and then you get to this stage of infertility, you know, no matter what your outcome is, I think motherhood's going to be redefined for you anyways, you know, because it's such a long struggle. And I know for me, it was redefined that I am such a better mom because of my struggles and what I went through.
Yeah, you work out your own shit kind of during the struggle, and like your triggers, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So you can be able to, know to take care of yourself, to then take care of others, especially the people that I coach now. I really teach them to like mother themselves so then they can mother someone else. So myself, when I was going through this, I was just kind of in this weird state of really blissful ignorance and naivete, and it actually worked for me. But so I didn't get slapped in the face,
Yeah.
which a lot of people, they go in kind of naive and then it doesn't work, and then then it's sort of like reality slaps you in the face. But I was one of the fortunate ones where it worked. But it is, yeah, letting go of how you see that, like the path, your journey of what it's going to look like. And as a planner, and I coach a lot of like type A
Hmm.
planner kind of people, it is to be able to let go of that. You can still have a plan, but not, it usually works out differently than what you anticipate.
Yeah, exactly. It seems like there's a lot of type A people in the infertility world.
I know, like the researchers and yeah, I was did an interview with Bettina Gordon. She's the author of Later Motherhood, and she had interviewed Dr. Christiane Northrup, and she was saying the higher up the MBA education, where you are on like your career, the higher up you are, the sort of the greater struggle you have, because you become so stuck in that left brain thinking, and you disconnected from your intuition, and the feeling piece is sometimes forgotten. So it's an interesting observation I thought she'd made there.
Yeah, that is. And considering a lot of women are older, going through this. So there is a lot of being stuck in your ways, isn't there? And I think you hit the nail on the hammer, the
Nail on the head.
hammer on the nail with, now I've lost my train of thought.
Nail on the head.
um, yeah, just working out your own shit, like you said. A lot of us, I know if I would have got pregnant at 27, I just wouldn't have realized how messed up in my own head that I was, and I would have put that on my kids, and just recycled the generations of, just little things. Like I had a great childhood. I love my parents. But yeah, there's just little things that they didn't, realize that they were doing, and I was bringing that on into my adulthood. And yeah, I guess it gave me time to sort my shit out. And I think that's one thing that's super annoying. I know people find it really hard to start connecting with themselves and being positive and grateful, and changing your mindset during the journey now, because whether you have kids or you don't have kids, you're going to have to deal with that stuff. So I always think you got a little bit of time on your hands, start doing the work. And yeah, the possibility of not becoming a mom is real when you're going through infertility. And not that I know that I hyper focused on that. And my language was very negative because I was guarding myself. And I was always like, well, kids aren't the end of the world. We'll have a life without them, which I do believe that we would have had a happy life without them as well. But I remember conversations, let's say like 3 years into my journey with friends and family. And then about 5 years into my journey, I started saying things, when we have kids, and not that that made me get pregnant or made it a reality, but I think it just shifted my mindset into, okay, no matter what the outcome is, I'm going to be okay. And it's okay to speak this way, to speak positively about what I want from life.
Just kind of during that time where so what were you saying again? I had a cough and I had to mute it.
um, just what was I saying? About when I started talking more positively about the outcome. So like 3 years into my journey, I remember having conversations with friends saying, they would ask, are you going to have kids soon? Because my husband and I were married almost 8 years by that point. And I would be like, who knows? Like, I don't know if kids are right for us, and I was guarding myself because I didn't want to get my hopes up. I didn't want them to know at the time, I suppose, that I was dealing with infertility. But about 2 years later, after my first failed IVF, and right before I started my second IVF, I started to change the way I answered people. And I started to say, when we have kids or when it works out. And I mean, still at that point, I was still unexplained. I still had never gotten a positive pregnancy test. And not that me starting to speak that way got me pregnant, but it started to help me shift my mindset into all the possibilities that might happen, the possibility of getting pregnant, not getting pregnant, adopting, egg donation, all those things. I started to open my mind and let those things come in.
Yeah, there is a thing where that guarding of your, guarding yourself and protecting yourself. And I remember saying, if this didn't work out, I was going to take a trip around the world, or, I was going to quit my job, or, we would adopt, or like, so I always vision myself as a mother. Um, but yeah, like I wanted it so badly, obviously for because we were just doing donor eggs, I wanted that to work. But there is that protection thing that to really go all in. And that's when people have a lot of hard time with the visualizing and reframing, because if they go all in, what happens if I'm like broken wide open and then I'm like lying like a puddle on the floor? Like, how will I continue if it doesn't work? Whereas being able to see it though helps then the hormones and the cortisol in your body to actually then help it work. And if it doesn't work because you've worked through all this stuff, instead of pushing it down because you're still thinking about it. Because
Hmm.
people say to me, oh, if I focus more on my fertility, I'm going to become obsessed with it. Well, you already are obsessed with it, but you just haven't talked to anyone about it, and you're
Yeah.
just thinking about it on a loop all day long. So this way, actually giving voice to it, talking about it, visualizing it, seeing it happen, it's reframing the whole experience. So it's not this like struggle, it's the journey, and there's the beginning, middle, and end. And maybe I like the quote from Robin Sharma, who's like, in the beginning it's messy, from the beginning it's hard, the middle is messy, and the end is gorgeous. So you could be stuck in the messy middle.
Yeah, and you don't know how long it's going to be. But you have to, well, yeah, you have to just keep going. And like you say, yeah, it's just not going to protect you from the bad being kind of that negative, pushing it down. If the outcome is not going to be what you want, it's still going to be the outcome, no
Mhm.
matter what you're saying to yourself. And like you say, like you are thinking about it all they always say like most people would be put in the loony asylum if they broadcast their thoughts. And so it's just retraining your brain to just be more optimistic and positive about it, because I know it's hard to see and understand. So so I was doing this, and one of the huge things that helped me was the 5-minute journal.
Mm.
And you don't see it why it's happening, it's just so minute. But I have the hindsight, and I look back, and I got pregnant for the first time off of our first frozen embryo. But when we went to the scan, there was no heartbeat. And I remember feeling obviously very sad and disappointed, but it wasn't earth shattering like I thought it would be. And that's all down to me doing, I think it was about 6 months of just retraining my brain. I mean, of course I cried, of course we were sad, we were disappointed, all those things, but it just wasn't the end of the world like I thought it was going to be. So yeah, that's just a little tangent off.
Yeah, you strengthened your resilience, like being
Yeah.
coping skills, and those, yeah, that 5-minute journal is awesome. Where it's
Yeah.
just like, what am I grateful for? And sometimes I do the little app they have for that, and I'm like, I just look back, I'm like, wow, I'm grateful for the sunshine a lot. Sun. And I'm a positive person, so but I'm like, the first thing that I'm like, oh, I'm grateful for the fact that I get to meditate, the sunshine, and my dog. And it doesn't need to be some big things, but then you're looking for the good, because
Yeah.
like we're programmed to focus on the bad. You could have this beautiful day where everyone said you look fabulous, everything went well. Then one person makes one comment, or something goes wrong, and it's all you think about. Oh my goodness, we're like programmed to focus on the negative. And
Yeah.
with this journey, because there can be, so it's a roller coaster of emotions, we just get fixated on that, and then we kind of go down the rabbit hole, and next thing you know, it's like we all go down, but you go down for minutes, hours, weeks, months, or
Right.
years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just saw a post on Instagram from a lady, and my heart went out for her, because obviously you feel super left out from your family and your friends when you don't have kids, especially if you are getting older and everyone is, achieving and you feel like you're not achieving. And then if you're not doing treatment, so say if you're on the IVF cycle or IUI cycle, you don't have anything to post on Instagram. So she was feeling left out from everywhere, I suppose. And like you say, you just get so hyper focused on fertility and infertility, where I'm sure if she started shifting and finding groups that she could be part of at the moment, or even just being a part of her family and her friends, kids, I know that's what I did. Yeah, I mean, everyone had kids before me, some 3. But I became the auntie and just started really enjoying my time with them, and being grateful that I was the one who got to sleep in the next day, or we got to travel on a whim's notice, and just started really focusing on everything that I had good in my life. And that made the journey so much easier, because I still had what, 3 years before I had my son. So it would have just been a really long, miserable time if I didn't find that mind shift. And it was key to get me through the infertility, get me through my pregnancies, which I think a lot of people just think, I'll get pregnant and everything will be fine. And then the hyper worry starts. And it's insane, and that's for another episode later. But so yeah, so I think that's us for today. Thank you very much for joining us, and I hope you guys are enjoying the podcast, and we'll see you next week. A few more things before you go. If you like what we're doing, please leave a review and or a rating. We would greatly appreciate it, and it would totally help us out. Also, if you like to connect with either of us, you can find me, Monica, over at mymindfulme.com, and you can connect with Sarah over on fabfertile.com. All the links you need to find us on our websites or social media, any products we talk about, books, special offers, or any guests that we have on, you're going to find all that information in the show notes. So that's it. Thank you once again for being with us here on the Infertile Diagnosis, and have a beautiful day.